Even a dentist can enter paradise. I don't know what made me say that. It's not the sort of thing I usually say. In fact, I don't usually say very much at all. Do you like dentists who are perpetually chattering and expect you to join in the conversation with your mouth propped open, your gums lagged with cotton wool, and a glass tube hung on your lip, burbling away like a hookah? I honestly think patients prefer you to keep quiet and get on with it. That's been my way with my wife, Megan. Keeping quiet, I mean. We can go through dinner quite comfortably, even when we're away on holiday, without saying very much to each other at all. As for the getting on with it department, well, that's tended to go rather quiet over the last 5 or 6 years. I suppose it happens with most married couples. What caused this sudden flurry of conversation was the fact that we were hanging in the air, Megan and I, that is, over a small green island set in clear blue water. As we dipped towards it, I saw a misty peak, forests of palm trees, and golden empty beaches. I must confess I felt excited. I might have been a boy again, looking at the map on the first page of Treasure Island. It may have been that distant memory of Robert Louis Stevenson which made me book up for a short break in the Society Islands on our way back from a conference on dental health and the new technology in Melbourne. "I suppose there'll be mosquitoes," Megan said. "In a place like that, there's always certain to be mosquitoes." "Mosquitoes in paradise?" I asked her. "Well, I suppose so, probably." We had flown in a small plane from Papeete, and when I'd telephoned the Hôtel des Îles, I'd been assured that we would be met on the airstrip. But I wasn't prepared in any way for the welcome we received. There was only one other couple destined for the hotel, and as we stepped out onto the hot tarmac, between the Pacific breakers and the green forest, what I can best describe as a vision in a straight dress, and clearly little else, came shimmering towards us. When I first saw her, she seemed about 18, although Megan, who remained untouched by her extraordinary beauty, told me that she must be at least 20. At that first meeting, she hung strings of white orchids round our necks and kissed us all. This I found a most delightful experience, and I have to report that she kissed me with more enthusiasm than she kissed Megan. "Welcome to the Hôtel des Îles. Bienvenue." The voice behind her was undoubtedly English. It came from a man about my age, pushing 60, that is, but I have to confess, in considerably better shape. Well, Megan is, as my mother used to describe in the advertisement she put in The Lady, a good, plain cook, and I feel the need of a substantial dinner after a long day standing by the chair and peering into the cavities. If I bend over suddenly, shirt buttons take off in all directions. The man who welcomed us was still lean and suntanned. He had a decent amount of curly grey hair left to him, and announced that he was Tim McGarry, manager and proprietor of the particular corner of paradise known as the Hôtel des Îles. He had a Land Rover, and ordered an old fellow in shorts and peaked cap to pile our luggage into it. "Where are you bound from here?" "Back to London, I'm afraid." "Back to the rat race?" "Well, you could call it that." Sitting in the front, I wasn't best placed to concentrate on McGarry's conversation, as fitted tightly between us was the island girl who had just garlanded me. I glanced whenever I could at her delicately smiling profile and the orchid which she now wore over one minute ear. Although she was so slim that she might have been blown away by a puff of wind from the ocean, her body was suitably rounded under the white dress, and her thigh was pressed warmly against my own. "Give yourself plenty of room. Squash up, why don't you? Mrs. McGarry won't mind at all." "Mrs. McGarry?" I imagined a tolerant middle-aged wife back in the hotel who apparently didn't mind how closely her husband sat to the natives. "Yes, Lala, my old woman. She kissed you at the airport, so I don't suppose you need any further introduction." I was contemplating the fact that a man of my age might be in a position to call a delectable Tahitian teenager his old woman, when McGarry asked me what particular branch of the rat race I was caught up in. "Oh," I said casually, half afraid that the news might put young Mrs. McGarry off me. It's odd how unaphrodisiac many women seem to find my profession. "I'm a dentist." At which point our driver said, "Snap!" in a loud voice, and threw back his head and laughed, almost slaughtering a goat which was crossing the road in a leisurely fashion. I had a good little practice in Welbeck Street, and a devoted nurse called Hilary, who I suppose I might have married if I hadn't escaped. Megan, sitting resolutely behind us with the luggage and the other guests, had been my dental nurse. How did you escape? I asked our host. I was on my way back from a conference of dentists in Australia, and I stopped off here. Well, I met a girl. As a matter of fact, I think she was one of Lala's innumerable great-aunts. The sun was shining, the sea was blue, the woods were full of wild chickens. Well, you know how it is. Well, not really, I had to admit. I cashed in all my savings and bought the hotel on the lagoon. My brother in dentistry was smiling at me, and once more I admired his teeth. I had said goodbye to the rat race. I slept fitfully. Megan spent a large part of the night with a rolled-up copy of the Dental Review in pursuit of what I felt to be an entirely imaginary mosquito. But at about 5 in the morning she fell into a deep sleep. I lay awake and thought about my life. Megan had appealed to me rather as a good sport than a beauty, a solid, dependable handler of probes and holder of patients' heads. We had, I often like to tell her, become good companions, and we rarely quarrelled. But to start life again, in a corner of paradise, perhaps with one of Lala's innumerable cousins, I found the thought unusually disturbing. So much so that I got up, climbed as quietly as possible into my clothes, and went for a walk. The sun was rising in a red sky across the lagoon, and sleeping parrots were waking in the trees, when on the road that led down the single mountain, I met Tim McGarry. He was wearing nothing but a pair of running shorts, and looked, I thought, exhausted and a little grey. "Been for a run?" I asked unnecessarily. 3 times round Sugarloaf Hill. I do that every morning. Lala expects it of a chap. He stood before me, sweating and trembling slightly. "It keeps you young." What keeps you young?" I asked. "The mountain or Mrs. McGarry?" Both of them, of course. If you've got a beautiful young wife, you have to keep in training. What happens if you don't, eh? Well, your performance goes to hell. And that's a thing the girls can't forgive. So I keep fit and keep my marriage going. I am incredibly lucky. Yes, I suppose you are. I thought of him returning for a shower and gently wakening a young girl sleeping as lightly as a bird. Sometimes I finish with a run up to the peak and down again. That's a tough one. I'm glad to do it, though. It doesn't seem to disappoint the old woman. I suppose it doesn't. Was Megan disappointed? She never said so. And it keeps me wonderfully fit. He slapped a surprisingly flat stomach. Look at that! Not a spare inch on me. You'd live another 20 years, you know, if you came to a place like this and got out of the rat race. Au revoir, brother of the tooth! He ran on then, seeming better for the break, waving goodbye to me as he went. If paradise is anything like the environs of the Hôtel des Îles, there is no doubt a great deal to be said for it. The eternal sunshine, the still, soft waters of the lagoon, the potent and sometimes bizarre cocktails knocked up at the bar in the main wooden hotel building, all these things, added to the absence of patients with decaying molars or rocky bridgework, made the few days we spent on the island extraordinarily peaceful. Often, in the early morning or during our siesta, with Megan dead to the world beside me, my thoughts strayed to Lala. I remembered the warmth of her body as she sat beside me in the Land Rover, and I thought that an old chap who called a fellow brother of the tooth might not be altogether worthy of her. We didn't see her again until our last night, when Tim McGarry invited us up to dinner at the house he'd built halfway up Sugarloaf Hill. He barbecued fish, and we ate it with a bottle of French champagne, looking down towards the bay where Captain Cook moored his ship. Curled up in a huge leather armchair, wearing another white slip of a dress, with her long legs and feet bare, Lala said, "Is it true, do you think, that Prince Philip has girlfriends?" "Certainly not." Megan had no doubts on the subject. "He is far too busy with the World Wildlife Fund." I looked at Lala and thought she seemed somewhat disappointed. "Major Ron seems to be the perfect gentleman. I suppose so. Megan pursed her lips slightly. If you like that sort of thing. And is it true that Princess Diana is no longer friendly with the people who made her wedding dress? I wanted a wedding dress like that. Tim didn't buy me one. We couldn't have got the train into the church. McGarry sounded tired, as though it were a conversation they'd had many times before. And Captain Mark Phillips? Lala's large eyes were turned on me trustingly, as though I were the source of all wisdom. How do you rate him in England as a lover? I'm afraid I can't help you. I hated to disappoint her. He takes a lot of exercise on horses. Lala looked somewhat crossly, I thought, at her husband. I expect he's terrific. From then on, and for the next 2 hours, Lala discussed our royal family. She knew the names of the royal corgis, Princess Di's nannies, and a whole range of Fergie's jokes. As her small voice, with its slight French accent, twittered on into the night, I looked at the bookshelves. I think they must have contained every volume ever published on the subject of the royals. McGarry must have spent a fortune on having them flown out from Harrods. By 10:30, hers was the only voice in the room. Her husband, looking every day of his 60 years, had fallen asleep. I think we'd better go. Megan rose with relief. It's a long flight tomorrow. Oh, no, please don't disturb your husband. But as we got outside the door, we heard Lala disturbing him with a high wail like the shriek of some exotic bird in the jungle. When I married you, my mother said, take an old man. He will treat you like a princess. But you don't even bed me like a princess. Why no train to my wedding gown? Why you never allow me to wear hats like Princess Diana? Tell me this, old man, when am I going to learn to drive a helicopter? At the sound of her voice, even the wild chickens awoke in alarm and flew squawking to the tops of the trees. Lala didn't appear the next day when McGarry drove us to the airstrip. I sat beside him in the front. Megan was once again installed with the luggage. I remember after a hard day's work at the chair, coming out into Welbeck Street in the rain. I used to go to the pub on the corner with Hilary, my dental nurse. We had some good times in the pub. Working together sort of draws you near a person. Don't you find that? Yeah, I suppose I do. She was a big girl, Hilary. No particular oil painting, but we had a few laughs. Interesting work, though. I expect you find that. You know what I always say. No two mouths are ever the same. I suppose, in a sort of way, you're looking forward to getting back to the rat race. I think I am, now the holiday's over. In a sort of way, perhaps, I envy you. We were bumping down a dirt road beside the glittering sea. Sometimes I think there's a good deal to be said for the rat race after all. The small plane rose to take us to Papeete and the flight home. I looked back and saw him waving, a tall man of my age, too fit for his own comfort, left behind in paradise.